Marie Catherine Laveau is believed to have been born in the year 1801 in the French quarter of New Orleans, Louisiana. Her mother was Marguerite d'Arcantrelle, a freed slave, and her father was Charles Laveau, the illegitimate son of Charles Laveau Trédu, a surveyor and politician who became the mayor of New Orleans. Both her parents were free people of color, but precise details on their lives are unknown due to the limited amount of surviving records. Some state that Marie's father was a wealthy businessman who owned a plantation. Meanwhile, others claim he was a shop owner. To better understand Marie Laveau's life story, it's important to look back at her ancestors, as well as the blend of cultures, customs, and religions from around the world which influenced New Orleans since it was established. France colonized what became known as Louisiana Territory in 1682. During this time, many Frenchmen married indigenous women, and lots only survived thanks to the help of the Native Americans. More than 30 years later, in 1718, Jean-Baptiste Lemonnier founded the town of La Nouvelle-Orléans, also known as the Crescent City. In 1722, New Orleans became the capital of French Louisiana. So of course the French wanted to grow crops on the surrounding land, expand the city, and make the colony as profitable as possible. Yet, they didn't have the necessary resources nor manpower to do so. As a result, thousands of West and Central African people were taken from their homelands and shipped to the ports of New Orleans, where they were sold as slaves. This is precisely what happened to Laveau's great-grandmother in 1743. She ended up enslaved in a foreign land after having been stolen from her family. Around this point in time, a set of laws known as the Black Code, which had been implemented by the French, had now become more liberal. This was mainly due to French Louisiana having become part of Spain's territory. Following various years of wars in the region, France found it extremely costly to keep the colony. So in 1762, the Treaty of Fontainebleau was signed, in which France ceded Louisiana to Spain. Under Spanish jurisdiction, treatment of enslaved people was slightly better. They could work in their free time and save up to buy their freedom, and also on Sundays they were permitted to go to the square and dance to African rhythms. Furthermore, liaisons similar to marriage between white men and free women of color were now allowed. Marie Laveau's grandmother, Catherine, was born into slavery a few years prior. She ended up being bought by a free woman of color and a successful entrepreneur named François Paumet. However, with hard work, she managed to buy her freedom, and when she was 42, even built herself a quaint home in New Orleans' French Quarter, the oldest neighborhood in the city. The cottage located on St. Anne Street would later become famous for being the home of Marie Laveau, the city's renowned Voodoo Queen. Marie's mother was also born into slavery, but as she worked diligently for her owners, she was freed at just 18. In October 1800, Spanish rule in New Orleans and Louisiana would come to an end under the Third Treaty of San Ildefonso. In it, the Spanish Empire would retransfer Louisiana to France in exchange for the Duchy of Parma. However, Napoleon Bonaparte soon decided not to keep the immense territory. A revolution in Haiti and a breakdown of relations with the United Kingdom led him to sell Louisiana to the newly founded United States for $15 million in 1803. In April 1812, Louisiana officially became the 18th state of the United States of America. However, prior to this, it was very different from the other states. The large influence from different cultures meant that French was the main spoken language. Official documents were in Spanish, and the official religion was Catholicism. Furthermore, Many white Southerners were against the idea that people of color could own slaves and have businesses, and that slaves had opportunities to earn their freedom. Marie Laveau was a great example of the cultural diversity that existed in New Orleans. She was a free woman of color, of African, Native American, and French descent. Details on her early life are scarce, but growing up she is known to have gone to Mass nearly every day. Marie was likely raised in her grandma's home, where she learned to become a hairdresser. In New Orleans, Roman Catholic practices were mixed with voodoo. For example, practitioners believed in God, but also communicated with ancestral spirits. Voodoo rituals intrigued Marie. Many of these practices were passed down from her mother and grandmother. On the 4th of August, 1819, Marie Laveau married Jacques Paris at St. Louis Cathedral. Details regarding the relationship are scarce, but it is known that Jacques was a free man of color who worked as a carpenter. He had fled to New Orleans as a refugee, just like thousands of others during the Haitian Revolution. Marie's relationship with Jacques must have started a few years prior to the marriage, as they had a daughter called Félicité in 1817 and Marie Angie in 1820. Baptismal records from St. Louis Cathedral prove this. However, in the 1820s, all records of Marie's daughters disappeared. It's possible that they died. Meanwhile, others speculate that they didn't actually have any children. Jacques Paris is believed to have passed away in 1820, but there is no documentation of his passing, only a declaration on his daughter's baptismal record. This sudden disappearance is one of the many mysteries surrounding Marie's life. What is known, however, is that around this time she began to call herself the Widow Paris. Marie once again fell in love in 1826 to a nobleman of French descent called Louis-Christophe Dumesnil de Gapion. He was a wealthy white gentleman who came from a prominent New Orleans family. At the time, interracial couples were forbidden to marry. Nevertheless, their relationship lasted until Glapion's death. It is reported that the couple had 15 children, but records show that Marie Laveau only gave birth to 7. Sadly, 3 perished in infancy. It's thought that her youngest daughter became the infamous Marie II, but we can't be certain. Marie's life as the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans is surrounded in rumor and speculation. No one knows how she rose to the position of Voodoo Queen, though some theorize that she trained under Sanit Dede and Marie Salope, or maybe even the famous Dr. John. However, it was more than likely thanks to the teachings of her mother and grandmother which propelled her to this position. When exactly she gained such a prominence is also unknown, though it is likely at some point during the 1840s. A newspaper article from 1869 mentions that Marie Laveau had reigned as the Voodoo Queen for a quarter of a century. Life for the free people of color was precarious in New Orleans, as they were on the edge of poverty and enslavement. Despite this, Marie supported her fellow citizens and was known to have great influence in the city. This was in large part due to her profession as a hairdresser, but also as she tried to know all she could about the people of New Orleans. Mary would style the hair of some of the most powerful women in the city, and she used this to her advantage. She always paid close attention to the secrets, complaints, and gossips of her elite white clients. All of this helped gain useful information, making many believe that she had powers of divination. Her reputation was such that the police were too afraid to confront her. Marie is believed to have frequently conducted voodoo rituals at her home in St. Anne Street Cottage, as well as dance in Congo Square and lead voodoo ceremonies along the shores of Lake Pontryarkin on St. John's Eve. She was said to have walked the streets like she owned them and danced as if she were the master of the spirit world. Marie was even known to dance with her snake, Le Grand Zombie, who was the major serpent spirit of worship among New Orleans voodooists. This symbolizes her power in the voodoo community. Legend states that her powers made her feared due to the stories of what happened to anyone who offended her. Although the city had other voodoo queens, her influence is why she reigned over all others as Queen of the Voodoos. Marie had a wide array of abilities, from casting of spells to performing of exorcisms. Her practices even gave her a nice income from the sales of amulets called grigris. These originated in Africa and are believed to bring luck or protect the wearer from evil. The Queen of the Voodoos is presumed to have offered sacrifices to spirits and even acted as an oracle. The strange potions she provided, her complex rhythms and rituals, and the sudden disappearance of her first partner made many believe she was conspiring with the devil. A local writer from the early 20th century named John Kendall wrote, "After dark, you might see carriages roll up to Marie's door, and veiled ladies in elegant attire descend and hurry in to buy what the old witch had for sale. An arrant fraud, no doubt, but money poured into her lap down to the last day of her evil life." Of course, Mr. Kendall was one of the many ill-informed people who believed voodoo was in some way linked to dark arts, yet this couldn't be further from the truth. The core value of New Orleans voodoo is protection and healing. Marie's home was a safe environment for all who lived there or visited. It was filled with images of saints, and she was known to have attended Catholic Mass almost daily. Without a doubt, Marie had a strong desire to help her community, providing locals with aid. When free women of color were accused of crimes, Marie would frequently post their bonds, granting them freedom until proven guilty. Furthermore, she comforted prisoners with food, prayers, and offered them guidance to redemption. Marie was also noted to have sponsored the education of many orphans and came to the aid of many Native American women. Her kindness to others was so great that she was even regarded as a living saint. In 1855, her lifelong partner, Christophe Glapion, passed away. Sadly, he left Marie with a lot of debt. This, combined with her philanthropic nature, put her in a very difficult financial position. In spite of this, her devotion to the people of New Orleans continued. The poor sanitation, accompanied by the city's subtropical climate and frequent flooding, led to the spread of many diseases and yellow fever epidemics. Unfortunately, the medicine available at the time didn't help and simply made things worse. Treatments included bleeding, emetics, and laxatives. On the other hand, the natural remedies provided by Afro-Creole nurses such as Marie were much more helpful. These women worked with the parish priests and gave patients nutritional herbal teas and refreshing baths. Sadly, the Civil War approached and things got much worse for Marie and other practitioners of voodoo. Racial tensions led to new laws in New Orleans, such as the prohibition of voodoo ceremonies. Following the Civil War and Emancipation Proclamation, white supremacists began to degrade voodoo and associate it with evil. Regrettably, some mocked their dances and rituals as orgies, while others stated that these practices proved that Africans were ignorant. As the years went by, Marie grew old and weak, slowly becoming more impoverished. She later passed away in her cottage on the 15th of June 1881. A large, diverse group of people attended her funeral, including members of the white elite. Also, thousands of people took to the streets in order to pay their respects to the woman who had helped so many. She was then buried in St. Louis No. 1 Cemetery. The distinguished writer Lafayette Heran referred to her as one of the kindest women who ever lived. Reporters from the time describe her as a saintly figure who nursed the sick and prayed incessantly with the deceased and condemned. Marie Laveau's life and legend lives on to this day. Every year, thousands of people visit her tomb in New Orleans. Some tales would have us believe that her ghost still roams the city, but this is untrue. Much of her story is still surrounded in mystery. The truth is that we will never truly know just how much of a voodoo queen she really was. But her life has inspired many books, songs, TV shows, and films. However, the majority of these emphasize and exaggerate her powers as a voodoo queen. Hello all, and thank you so much for listening. I'd like to thank Forgotten Lives for inviting me on to today's episode. He'll be back next week to entertain you all once more. Thanks guys. Take care.